So I'll take a breath. Maybe shake and wiggle a little bit, just like. So 15 years ago, I was dating a really fun musical woman named Kathy Queen. And she said, Fred, you've got to meet this guy. There's this really, you guys would just hit it off so well. And 15 years ago, Brian was dating this cool woman named Kathy Queen. And she's telling me, Brian, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet this guy. And it's funny because neither Brian or I went very far with her. We became good friends, but didn't go very far. But the two of us ended up becoming best buddies and doing all sorts of fun stuff together. And I want to speak, Brian was such a multifaceted man, many just aspects to him. We're not even touching on all of them today, but I want to touch on three. One is Brian as a spiritual man, and one is Brian as a sexy man, and one is Brian as a community man. So as a spiritual man, the thing that almost everyone here I'm sure knows is Brian, when he connected, he'd just come up and he would just present himself and he would connect. It's like, you. And he would just shine, and suddenly you would feel seen, and he would feel seen, and there's all this juice that would happen. There's a way that Brian's spirit just touched my spirit when we first met, and the spirit of everyone here. And this is where the spirit was such a big piece, and it didn't matter who you were. He worked with many autistic kids, and he could just look into the eyes. And autistic kids don't look into your eyes, generally. But Brian could start doing things, and they'd start going, you could tell, who is this dude? It's like, who's this dude? Kind of gets me. And autistic, nobody gets autistic kids, hardly. And, we'll be hearing a little bit about that. So it didn't matter age, body size, body type. He just loved everybody. And it was such a rich gift for him to feel the heart and share his heart so fully with all of us. So that's Brian as a spiritual dude. And then there's Brian as the sexy Brian with those tight shorts when he's dancing and just having a blast. And one of those, he just would uninhibited, totally uninhibited in his dance and movement and just sexy. But not only that, Brian particularly in his later years, he was a deep commitment to healing one of the biggest wounds on our planet, which is the sexual wound. There's just so much sexual damage that happens to so many people when they're young, and Brian was a sexual healer. And I'm not going to go into any details, but he and I sometimes would even partner up and do amazing things, and people would be healed in deep and powerful ways. And Brian knew how to respect sexuality as a huge, powerful energy, and yet only to use it for higher purposes and for fully consensual connections. And he was stepping more and more into that in his life, and it's just really don't want to hide that aspect. And I know it's maybe strange that some people didn't know that aspect, but he was an amazing sexual healer. And I thank him so much for that. And I know many people here have maybe even experienced some of that. And then as community, he was such a stand for community. We met in community. Actually, even though Kathy told us both to meet, he came to this event I pulled together where we were forming a community, and he became one of the core members of that community called Sacred Connections. And then he became parts of other communities, and he was often a leader in these communities. And he was one of those people who would watch out. It's like, okay, if people were doing something that was going to damage the community, he would come up and say, that's not okay. You cannot do that. And he would explain why. It's not, I honor who you are, but we need to have a sacred container for this community. And he wanted us all to reach out and love each other. That's who Brian was. So I really want to invite everyone here to open and even feel the sense of community in here. Feel how we share his presence. And one thing I have to tell you, I think it was about one day after he died, I was sitting there kind of opening to what went on, and I just got this vision, and I feel like it came from Brian. It's like Brian as a soul before he came into this body, And here he is with this being, God, or whatever you want to call it, saying, okay, so Brian, like, you get setting up your life. What do you want to kind of do this lifetime? And like, okay, well, maybe this and this. And it said, so like, and what about your death? How do you want to do your death? Do you want to do like kind of the, slow, get sick, or just die in your sleep? Or maybe, there's always a possibility you could go out in your peak, in your glory. And Brian's like, yes, I want to go out in my peak. I want to go out in my glory. And there's a way, I suspect his soul somehow consciously chose this just because he wanted to have this full expression, but also because with his death, as you all know, he is sending out this tsunami of love. Literally a tsunami of love. I have seen it in all of our communities just rolling out and invite us all to breathe in that love that is there. And to know that now Brian is an ancestor. He's our ancestor, and he can be your spirit guide, and you can embrace him and ask him, Brian, I've been dancing with him in those realms and feeling it so richly. Thank you, dear brother Brian, for all that you were, for all that you are, and all that you will be. I just want to share a poem written by Sharissa Leilani McDaniel that so describes Brian so beautifully, and I'll end with this. It's called Brian's Song. Brian Baker, you are so divine, loved by so many, yes, you do shine. The dancer, the musician, such a kind, pure heart, so playful and energetic. No one wanted you to part. So much talent indeed, wise, creative, and fun. You inspired so many, you shine like the sun. Those cute little shorts, raw treats where you go, feeding others with your magic. You are a star that glows. You are so funny and yummy, sharing blessings far and wide. Yes, they are so lucky to have you on the other side. So popular and creative, they now say, what would Brian do? Now that's a life well lived, a fitting tribute and honor to you. You stood in your truth. You led the way. Oh, Brian, we'll miss you. We wanted you to stay. It's such a mystery and such a shock. We just don't understand why heaven's door did knock. We need to accept. We just don't know why. Our hearts are grieving. Yes, our souls do cry. We trust you're an angel now. What a radiant one you'll be. Please guide and watch over us. Fly high, brother, and be free.